Thanks, and welcome everybody to this Meet Us in the Garden presentation. My name is Becky Foltz. I'm a Master Gardener with the Lake County, Ohio State University Extension Office. Been a Master Gardener for about 7 years, and I volunteered in a lot of different areas in the community, but I seem to like working in community gardens best. We have a square foot garden in the Peace Garden at the Lake County Fairgrounds, and we have a juvenile justice garden, vegetable garden, where we work with the residents to grow vegetables. And just this year we opened a community garden in Paynesville at the Elm Street Elementary School. Those plots are available on an ongoing basis, so if you need a place to garden, that would be a great spot. It's just absolutely wonderful. Before we get started on the program, I want to just remind everybody of our address. We're located at 105 East Main Street, Suite 402B, and that's in Paynesville. Our number is noted there. Master Gardeners are a group of volunteers trained in horticulture by Ohio State University. They volunteer their time assisting with educational programs and activities for Ohio residents. To learn more about the Master Gardener program, you can go to the mastergardenerosu.edu website. If you wanted to contact the Master Gardeners directly, the email address is mgvlakecounty@gmail.com. Helpline is one of our other programs, and that is a Master Gardener staffed volunteer helpline for residents to call with their gardening or insect questions. And that is in operation from March through October. However, that number now, even though we're only staffed, the number is available 24/7. So if you call, leave a message, somebody will get back to you in a very timely manner. But with COVID easing, we do have office hours again. You can bring your questions or your samples right to the office on Tuesdays from 9 to 11. Today's program is brought to you by Meet Us in the Garden, a program that presents garden topics monthly, March through November. So I have to confess, I was given this topic, native plants, blended families, specifically native and non-native plants living harmoniously, to present. Well, as it turns out, as I began researching, there's not a whole lot of support for non-native plants, okay? So that's just the way that's going. So while we'll discuss non-native plants in the landscape, today's talk will focus on native plants and incorporating them into your landscape. What we'll talk about today, we'll define native and non-native plants. We'll discuss the importance of and benefits of native plants. We'll talk about the benefits of non-native plants and why we like them. We'll talk about how you can add native plants to your landscape or yard. We'll also discuss some native plants and landscape design ideas. And finally, we'll provide you with lists of native plants for our area. And we have some native plant seeds for you to take home as well. Okay, so you can look forward to that at the end. Does somebody want to take a stab at defining what a native plant is? Just raise your hand. It could be one word. Yes?
Be like natural to this area.
Natural to this area. Anybody else have something they want to add to that?
It's adapted to the area.
Adapted to the area. Yes?
Something that attracts a lot of bees and insects.
Awesome. Yeah, attracts a lot of bees or insects. Good ideas, you guys. Here is a simple definition. A native plant is one which occurred within the region before settlement by the Europeans. Native plants do include ferns, grasses, perennial and annual wildflowers, woody tree shrubs, and vines that covered the woods before the first settlers. According to wildflower.org, a definition of native plants should include the human factor. And that is implied in that definition, but wildflower.org does like the 1998 definition by the American Gardener, and it says, native plants should be defined as those that have evolved and adapted to a specific location and have remained genetically unaltered by humans. Okay. I like what Lady Bird Johnson says. She says native plants give us a sense of where we are in this great land of ours. I want Texas to look like Texas, and I want Vermont to look like Vermont. And here is a picture of the native Texas bluebonnet. So for non-native definition, you can see the terms exotic, alien, which is a weird word for me to think about with relationship to plants. Ornamental, a plant that was not here when the Europeans first settled. A plant that was introduced by some human action, either accidentally or on purpose. So let's follow that definition with some examples of non-native plants. Here is your peony or the peonia. It's not native to Northeast Ohio. It's native to China, named for the Greek healer of the gods, Pion. The bleeding heart, one of my personal favorites, Dicentra spectabilis, is native to northern China and Japan. It was discovered and brought to England by an explorer of the Royal Horticultural Society in 1846. Again, not native to Ohio. There's the azalea, which originated in China and Japan. They made their way to the US via England, France, and Germany around 1830. They were first planted in Charleston, South Carolina, and that area has been associated with azaleas ever since. Non-native plants, those that aren't here naturally, can be invasive. Some non-native plants have aggressive root systems that spread long distances from a single plant. Often they grow so dense that they smother the root system of the surrounding plant. And that to me is like key of why you shouldn't plant them. This can cause extinction of native plants and animals that rely on those plants for food, cover. Non-native plants compete with all native organisms for limited resources and alter habitats. Purple loosestrife, we're all familiar with that plant. It was introduced in North America from Europe and Asia during the early 1800s. It was valued as a medicinal herb for the treatment of diarrhea, dysentery, bleeding, wounds, ulcers, and sores. It is considered invasive as it grows rapidly, produces many seeds, and has no natural predators. The plant quickly establishes itself and crowds out native wetland plants. Some people say that you should never plant loosestrife in your garden. Here's another one of my favorites, lily of the valley, or Convallaria majalis, is listed as an invasive plant in the Atlas of the United States, Invasive Plant Atlas of the United States. According to the U.S. Forest Service, invasive species contributed to the decline of 42% of U.S. endangered and threatened species, and for 18% of U.S. endangered or threatened species. This is one of my favorite plants. I love the smell of it. You just know that that scent is sweet and green and with a little hint of lemon. It's hard to imagine a more spring smelling plant. It's funny that one of my favorite perfumes is Cashmere Mist by Donna Karan, and I happened to find out not too long ago that Lily of the Valley is one of its major notes. So no wonder I loved it. So now that we've defined native and non-native plants, let's talk about why native plants are so important. The number one reason is that native plants support biodiversity. With the loss of habitat and urbanization, we need to create wildlife-friendly landscapes. According to an article by Ohio State University, habitat loss is a leading cause of species endangerment and extinction. A wildlife-friendly landscape will provide food, water, cover or shelter, and a place for wildlife to raise their young. How does a native plant support that? Well, they are adapted to local conditions, and wildlife species are adapted to those native plants. Of course, we want to keep seeing this beautiful caterpillar and this beautiful bumblebee. Research by Doug Tallamy has shown that native Oak trees support over 500 species of caterpillars. Compare that to the ginkgo tree, which is native to Asia, supports only 5 species of caterpillars. When you consider that it takes 6,000 caterpillars to feed one brood of chickadees, it's significant. Oak trees support more life forms than any other trees in North America. Here is Doug Tallamy, who I just mentioned. He is an American entomologist, ecologist, and conservationist. He's a professor of entomology and wildlife biology at the University of Delaware. According to Tallamy, we are at a critical point of losing so many species from local ecosystems that their ability to produce oxygen, clean water, flood control, pollination, pest control, carbon storage, etc., that is, the ecosystem services that sustain us, will become seriously compromised. Tallamy started this homegrown national park, which is a grassroots call to action movement, and he started that to regenerate biodiversity. He says no experience is necessary, just start digging. I think they even give you signs for your yard. Tallamy says, in the past we have asked one thing of our gardens, that is that they be pretty. Now they have to support life, sequester carbon, feed pollinators, and manage water. That's a lot, right? If you're interested in this movement, learning more about it, Google it. There's lots on the internet. There's also a Instagram page that I follow. Speaking of Douglas Tallamy, I absolutely love all of his books. They're easy to read. The pictures are great. Again, you can Google his titles, but there's one called Bringing Nature Home, The Nature of Oaks, The Living Landscape, and Nature's Best Hope, Your Backyard. So, in addition to supporting biodiversity, native plants are easier to grow and less expensive to maintain than your typical green lawn. You don't have to purchase fertilizers or pesticides, you don't have to water, and you don't have to mow. Lawns represent 30 million acres in the United States. Seed technology made beautiful lawns achievable at the consumer level. Are you on trend? So in 1952, that's the lawn on the left. Keep your lawn mowed, fertilized, and weed-free to show you are a responsible citizen. But 2022, shrink your lawn and plant natives to show you are a responsible citizen. Native plants can help to reduce air pollution. According to the EPA, gas-powered lawnmowers make up 5% of the total air pollution in the United States. This is in the UK, a place called Rotherham, where council have planted 8 miles of wildflower verges. It has saved $25,000 in mowing costs. These photos were posted by the British Beekeeping Association. So speaking of lawns, there is an article, a series in the Plain Dealer, the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I don't know if you guys see it. It usually shows in the Metro section on Sundays. Her first gardening article, and I'm going to pass this around so you can take a look at it. Should you kill your grass to make way for native plants? And I think Susan Brownstein recently moved to Cleveland from California, but she said about planting natives in California and now in Ohio that she liked the ease of growing native plants. And she was pleasantly surprised at the response from local birds, bees, and butterflies. Native plants can help reduce soil erosion. And that slide sort of says it all. If you see your turf grass and its root system there on the left, compared to all of the other grasses and sedges on the right. That's kind of amazing, huh? Native plants can give year-round beauty. There's your goldenrod, which I think is absolutely stunning. In the fall, golden flower heads brighten the landscape and attract bees and butterflies. In the winter, dried flower heads provide interest. In the spring, you have emerging narrow green plants, and in the summer, you have the flower buds. The red twig dogwood gives you clusters of berries hanging from stems in the fall. You have the red twigs that really stand out in your garden once the leaves fall off. In the spring, you have green leaves sprouting on the red branches. In summer, you have yellow-white flowers blooming through June through August. How about the sugar maple? In the fall, those leaves turn orange, red, and yellow. In the winter, that gray bark stands out in your landscape. In the spring, you have those winged sea pods hanging from the branches and then falling to your ground. And in the summer, large green leaves provide cooling shade. So to summarize, native plants support biodiversity. They're less expensive to maintain, no fertilizers, pesticides, or water. They provide year-round beauty, reduce soil erosion, and air pollution. So what is it we like about non-native plants? Anybody want to add anything?
Color.
Color. Yeah. Anybody else? Variety. They sort of take all of the most attractive features and put them all together in one plant. So sure, you have color as being one of the big things that people like, that burst of color. Uniformity, the manicured look, seeing definite forms are other reasons that people like native plants. So maybe about now you're thinking, hopefully, of converting your yard to include more native plants, shrubs, and trees. When getting started, you'll want to consider several things. So you don't need to do it all at once. A lot of recommendations start with, as one of your annual plants die or your non-native perennials, just replace it with a native plant. So that's a good way to think about starting, or do some research and figure out what looks good to you, so you can switch out your plants slowly. Another thing people say is that you should, when you're thinking about your yard and your landscape and what you want to do with it, think about what you look out on from inside your house and what you might want to see, and then you can make your change. That kind of looks like my backyard. Lots of oak trees. And then also, don't fight the site. So if you're looking out on a wooded scene like that one on the left, a forest, don't try to put plants there that require a lot of light or dry conditions, right? They're gonna want specific plants for that area. And then also, if you've got a meadow or a sunny spot, don't try to put woodland plants there. The other thing you'll want to consider is your soil. What kind of soil do you have? Has anybody here done a soil test kit? Susan, anybody else? You have? I did one a few years ago, and it's really kind of a fun project. And it's not hard to do. You can actually purchase soil kits from the Extension office. They're only $10, cash or check, and they can be purchased during normal business hours. The analysis is done, in our particular case, the analysis done at a non-biased university soil testing lab at Penn State. The report will give you a chemical analysis of the soil along with lime and fertilizer recommendation. And then our A&R educator at the office is always there to answer additional questions. It's really interesting to see what your soil has and what it may need. Light is the other thing. Light is really important. Again, your woodland plant, something that's used to very low light and most soil, isn't going to do well in a sunny spot, right? Also, check out what's already growing in your yard. So I moved into a new house, a new older house, a year ago, and as much as I wanted to start digging in those beds, and just kind of making it my own, I waited till spring, and I was just so pleasantly surprised when spring came, because there were a number of native plants in there and I didn't recognize them by their foliage. Plus I was too busy doing other things, getting the house ready. But anyway, so see what you've got, see what you like, see what you'd like to keep, and then based on your research, figure out what you'd like to include. Going back to the article by Susan Brownstein, the one that's floating around, take a look around your yard. Are there areas that aren't doing so well? Consider making that your new native plant bed. Use a hose or a rope, like she's done there, to mark off your new bed or area. An easy way to kill the grass is to mulch the grassy area with cardboard and newspaper. Cover that with mulch, and in just a few weeks, you'll be able to start digging in your soil. Remember, when we talk about native plants, we talk about trees, shrubs, perennials, and all of those plants for either prairie, meadow, or woodlands. In the following slides, I'm going to show you some Northeast Ohio native plants. For spring blooms, think about the yellow flag iris, or Iris pseudochorus. Pretty, right? Also, phlox paniculata. I actually have those growing in my yard. It's one of those plants I didn't know I had, but pretty, right? And my sister Kathy pointed out how nice they smell. Another spring bloom would be the anemone, Hepatica anemone. There we go. I'm taking that to being a woodland plant. You can tell just by the dark surrounding. And another is the violet, or this one is called the Viola sororia. Virginia bluebells, Mertensia virginica. So I have these in my yard. Yesterday I walked by, the number of bees was incredible. Just incredible. And I don't see that on any other plants in my yard. So it's too bad I have to wait this long to see them late in the season. Okay, for summer blooms, we all know the Shasta daisy, right? Leucanthemum superbum. That's taken from my yard. Another good one is the flax, Linum louisi. Isn't that pretty? You guys familiar with the common evening primrose, native to Ohio? Oenothera biennis. And there's the ones in my yard. Just so pretty. I love that color of yellow. We all know spiderwort. This is the one in my garden. Isn't that color just beautiful? For fall blooms, there's a New England aster. I like this so much that I ordered a package, and you guys are all going to get some seeds to take home of the New England aster today. We all know the purple coneflower, or the Echinacea purpurea, as well as the black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia hirta. So substituting native plants for your favorite non-native plants. So if you like that peony or the bleeding heart, I've got some suggestions for you. And just so you know, there is a book called The Midwestern Native Garden by Charlotte Edelman and Bernard L. Schwartz. Great resource, and that's exactly what this book does. It tells you what plants you can substitute for your favorite non-native. So you've got your peony. You might consider planting cow parsnip, large beard tongue, or queen of the prairie. Anybody familiar with any of those native ones? I've heard the name before. There's your cow parsnip. Showy blooms. I like that one, the queen of the prairie. And then if you like your bleeding heart, the alternatives are fringed bleeding heart, wild bleeding heart, or Dutchman's breeches, which I've heard of before. There's your fringed bleeding heart. Isn't that cute? And you can see the foliage is very similar to the non-native bleeding heart. There's your Dutchman's breeches. And if you like lily of the valley, feathery false lily of the valley, Solomon's plume, false Solomon's seal, and false spikenard. There you can see the false lily of the valley, Solomon's plume. Yeah, I don't think we'll have that fragrance. I don't know. It'd be interesting to know that. If you like foxglove, the alternatives are the large beard tongue or the large flowered beard tongue. And there you can see the plants are the blooms are very similar. And then your crocus. Some good alternatives would be the American pasque flower, wild crocus, blue tulip, prairie smoke, long plume purple avens, and old man whiskers. There's the pasque flower. That's pretty, isn't it? And so similar to the wild crocus. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. You know that there are resources out there to substitute for those plants that you like. So let's talk a little bit about the landscape and a few things that you should consider if you're gardening with native plants, because they're not usually compact and definite form and manicured looking. But if you like the bold color, you could do something like that, where you're combining a large number of plants to make a statement. And then also grouping plants for the succession of the seasons. Plant those right next to the other plants. Then if you want to mix non-natives and natives in a bed, you would just consider all of the things you normally would. Height, color, does it look good with this plant, that type of thing. Keep plants in scale. I'd never heard this before, but choose plants that don't grow taller than half of a bed width. So if a bed is 6 feet tall, choose plants that are no taller than 3 feet. Kind of makes sense. I mean, that's a large bed, and they've got some tall plants there. Another thing you can do is to border your plants with stone, brick, or some other natural material. You can see how that just kind of makes it look clean, attractive, and intentional. There's another type of border. Probably wine bottles. Another border made out of brick. Also, putting some focal points in your garden will help.
Just a comment on the wine bottles.
Yeah.
My niece works at a gardening center, and she says the butterflies like to drink the water.
Oh, that collects, yeah. Oh, that's neat.
In the bottom,
Yeah.
and they like to drink the water out
So
of it.
cool, that's really neat. Yeah, very good. Statuary can help lend a formal air to a garden. Garden paths or leading lines can draw your eye to a particular place, and they can break up a large planted area. So to get back to the original presentation topic of native and non-native plants living together harmoniously. Can they live together harmoniously? Yes, they can. But I think the key thing, and hopefully you got this from the presentation, is that a non-native plant can crowd out and take over your other plants, your more beneficial plants. So that's why you should maybe consider going more native than not. If you're wondering how to get started planting more plants, I would suggest looking at the list that I'm going to give you. There is also lots of information on the web. The USDA plant website has a list of native plants to a particular area. Okay, are there any questions? Yes, Dave?
Well, you mentioned the invasiveness of non-native plants. Are there any native plants that are invasive?
They will spread, but they're not going to crowd out. The fact that they're providing a service in the landscape to local birds and bees and butterflies, that's their benefit. They're not going to crowd out another plant. Maybe some may have that tendency. I think you'd have to look at them specifically, Dave. You know what I mean? Like look at your Shasta daisies. Yes, they spread. But are
very fast, since I have those too.
Yeah. So sure they spread, but then you as a gardener say, do I want them to fill up this area? Do I want something else in front of them? That type of thing. Deal with them on an individual basis. Gwen, you had a question?
Yes, I do. I love vines. Mm-hmm. And I don't see too many native vines out there.
So that's a good question. You will see on the handout from Petites, I think it is. They list some. Have you seen that, Gwen?
No, I haven't.
Oh, I've also got I'm going to pass around this Ohio State University Extension fact sheet. So you could just give that to someone to start, Kathy. Thank you, my assistant, Kathy. So right here, native vines, Petites, trumpet vine, honeysuckle. They give the
I have those, but I guess the ones that I have may not be the native.
so it gives the scientific name here, so that you can also.
Maybe I do have those and I don't even know.
I know, right? You don't even know which one is. But I had that question too, Gwen, about what was the plant I was wondering? Well, the magnolia.
Yeah.
which magnolia, which scientific name magnolia is. And then you've got it in your yard. It's been there for 60 years. You didn't put it in. How do you know what you've got? Type thing, right? So you had your hand, and then I'll get to you next.
There's some native ground covers that are safe and not terribly invasive.
One of the things they do recommend is wild strawberry. I don't know if you've heard that. Did you have a question over here? Yes.
So when you said you're going to germinate, I'm sorry, I mean, are you going to do it in little pots or are you going to put them right in the ground?
Oh, I'll probably do, so in the fall, I would probably put them in the ground right now. I might clear a little patch and try that, but in the spring, I'll probably do winter sowing, which has been another topic of our Meet Us in the Garden series. Yeah, so, any other questions? Yes?
All these plants that we're talking about, are they all perennials or do they have any annuals that are?
Oh, good question. I think there are annual natives.
I think the wild crocus is annual, right?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Google it and use the site that is either .org or .edu. Well, listen, we're about at our time's end. I want to thank you all for coming today. I hope you enjoyed the talk and that you gained some information. So, you're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you.